Good afternoon and welcome to ERDC Live. I'm your host, Shelley Tingle with the U.S. Army Engineer Research and Development Center. Since its founding in 1929, ERDC has been an organization that thrives on solving what others believe to be unsolvable, discovering the answers many believe could not be found. It is this tenacity and commitment to our nation that has made ERDC and the entire U.S. Army Corps of Engineers research and development community so trusted and successful. From confronting and mitigating the impacts of climate change, incorporating nature-based solutions to improve our nation's infrastructure, to developing new techniques for managing reservoirs that expands the availability of water across our nation, ERDC's research is making a difference and improving lives. Today, we welcome Dr. David Pittman, Director of ERDC, who also serves as Chief Scientist and Director of R&D for USACE. Welcome, Dr. Pittman, and this is your third visit to ERDC Live. I appreciate you being
Thank you,
here.
Shelley. It's great to be here.
And happy early E-Week.
Yay! That's next Sunday, I think.
Yes, it's Sunday. It kicks off Sunday. So I want to first talk to you about Engineers Week, or E-Week. We call it E-Week. That begins Sunday. Before we begin our discussion on world-class research and development here, please talk to us about the power of ERDC, our people, and specifically the engineers and scientists who drive our research and that we celebrate during E-Week.
Well, thank you, Shelley. This is great to talk about E-Week. I'm an engineer, you're an engineer, and we got a bunch of engineers that work in ERDC, Engineering Research and Development Center. So we're about 2,500 people, about 2/3 engineers and scientists. So particularly for those, I think we're part of the Corps of Engineers. Everybody's an engineer, but we got some degreed engineers and folks that do this every day. And so ERDC has all of these people focused on discovering, developing, delivering new ways to make the world safer and better every day. We do that in civil works, we do it in military programs, a broad mission space. And so our engineers are focused on R&D for the Army Corps of Engineers, the warfighter, and the nation. They're coming up with those new ways of solving problems, that creative spirit, and it's ultimately about problem solving. So if you can do it today, that's what regular engineers do. What we do is figure out how to do it tomorrow.
That's right. And it's an exciting time to be an engineer,
Yes.
That's for sure. So this year's theme for E-Week is creating the future. I mean, doesn't that just sound like ERDC?
That's ERDC. That's what we do.
Creating the future. How does ERDC's research create the future by providing innovative solutions that impact future generations?
Yes, so creating the future. That could be our motto at ERDC, right? That's what R&D does. If we can do it right now, that's what engineers do. Corps of Engineers does that, some of the best engineers in the world. What R&D does is create that new future, those new technical solutions to solve the world's biggest problems from an engineering standpoint. And so on the warfighter side, we're coming up with all kinds of technologies today, working with Army Futures Command and other Army entities and the warfighter themselves to come up with technologies to protect our soldiers when they're fighting downrange, to get the soldiers to the fight, mobility, logistics over the shore, landing at beaches, that sort of thing, protecting them from the biggest weapons the enemy can throw at us. That's on the warfighter side. On the civil works side, we're all about protecting our nation's commerce. It's all about navigation, or all the nation's navigable waterways. The Corps of Engineers is responsible for that, but we got a lot of challenges on our waterways. We got a lot of aging infrastructure, our locks, our dams, our levees. All that's getting old. Most of us built 50, 60, 70, 100 years ago. So it's aging. So how do we keep our nation's commerce running? How do we protect our shorelines, our coastal lines from hurricanes? The intercoastal waterways we have along our nation, that's run by the Corps of Engineers. And so we got a huge civil works mission that we have to do and a huge military mission. And then we do a lot of support for others, like Department of Homeland Security. We actually work very closely with them. I was actually visiting with them last week. We're putting a lot of our technology out there actually protecting our homeland with, say, the Department of Homeland Security and many other agencies and partners out there. So we're creating the future, not just by ourselves, but with our partners out there every day.
And that's part of the power of ERDC.
Yes.
Is our ability to partner
Partnering.
and bring the right people to the table to solve the problem.
That's it.
And so, and what better way of celebrating E-Week than talking about ERDC's research and development? So I want to remind the audience that you too are part of the conversation. So if you're watching us on YouTube or LinkedIn, be sure to ask a question, and we will be answering those shortly. So, Dr. Pittman, when you joined us here last year, a year ago, we focused most of our discussion about the launch of the USACE research and development strategy. So it's been a year.
Yes.
A year later, how has that strategy elevated ERDC R&D within the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and beyond?
Well, Shelley, it's been amazing. I mean, we put that strategy together. Believe it or not, we never had in our history. We've only been around since 1775, so it took us a little while.
A little while.
Yes. To develop a strategy for all the R&D missions that we have, all the missions in the Corps, for civil, military, and everything in between. So we came out with the top 10 R&D priorities. That's the key feature of the R&D strategy. So if you hadn't seen it yet, please download a copy of it. You know, it's out there. Just Google it. You can pull it down. But since the launch of that, it's been very exciting because the Chief of Engineers, General Spellman, Mr. Connor, particularly on the civil works side, Ms. Jacobson on the installation, energy, and environment side, they're all recognizing the need to have R&D to tackle the challenges that we're facing in the future. We can't solve tomorrow's challenges with today's technology. We have huge problems out there. So that's the reason the chief asked us to write the strategy. So we wrote it, we put it out there, creating a lot of excitement out there. So other things we're doing now with the strategy, now we're raising R&D within the Corps of Engineers. So it's not just ERDC, it's a Corps of Engineers strategy. So all of our divisions out there. We have 9 divisions in the Corps. That's where most of the people in the Corps of Engineers work, are in our divisions. They're actually delivering the levees and the dams and the military installations. They're building them, okay? So now they're getting involved in R&D and what we're calling operational R&D. So it's really just operationalizing this new technology within their projects themselves. So they're bringing in new technology. For instance, we just had a presentation last week at our governance meeting about fabrics, basically composite materials that one of our engineers came up with, using basalt as the main material in it. But you can put it on some of our steel gates. Some of these gates are decades old. You know, most of them are decades old, 60, 70, 80 years old. And they crack and they wear out just like anything else wears out. Normally, we go through a very expensive operation of dewatering the lock, removing the gate, putting a big new gate in there, millions of dollars, holds up the traffic. It's just a big problem. So what our guys did was come up with a composite material that you can simply clean off where it's cracking or anticipated crack, bond that material on there, it's good as new, good to go. In hours, not days or weeks. So that's the kind of answers that we need going forward to address the very specific challenges that we're having, again, on the civil works side and on the military side. And we're getting all the Corps of Engineers involved in this now. So every MSC is thinking about how can I use this new technology as we deliver a record program in the Army Corps of Engineers. So we're doing things like that. We're also telling the story. This is an example of telling the story. So we're really getting out there and we're saying, hey, we got to have partners out there. We want to tell the kind of technologies that we need to do, that we are doing, and how can we get help? So we need help across the government agencies. I just talked about Department of Homeland Security, for instance. We work with EPA, we work with other, just about any government agency out there that works in the engineering and science space, NOAA, National Weather Service. So we got to have partners in government, we got to have partners in academia, and we do. We got to have partners in industry, we got to have partners internationally to deliver these world-class solutions to these world-class problems. So part of that telling that story is something we just came out with, is the USACE R&D FY22 annual report. So the chief said, David, can you put down our top accomplishments we did last fiscal year, it ended last September. What's those top, basically, products that we come out with? And the programmatics behind it a little bit, but it's a very nice document here. We're going to make it available for the whole world. We just launched it last week. And to get this copy, it's got a lot of neat pictures in it, nice stories, storytelling, but the top projects that we came out with in the past year, and we'll put out another one next year across our civil works, military programs, and support for others program areas. That's what we're doing.
That's very exciting. So some of the success stories that you were talking about in the annual report. So what are some of those success stories that have emerged as you and other USACE leaders have worked to connect the dots, as we say, between ERDC's R&D and real-world challenges?
Speaking of connecting the dots, we got another publication. So we're really trying to tell the story, okay? Again, here's a quarterly newsletter we put out, and we can make this available to the public as well. But we talk about different kinds of technologies. And by the way, when we talk about how this is a Corps of Engineers R&D strategy, we have 9 division commanders out there. This is General Holland. She wrote the intro to this particular Connect the Dots issue. So we're really connecting the dots between the technology that's developed inside of ERDC or somewhere else and being used by our divisions. General Holland commands the Mississippi Valley Division, also headquartered right here in Vicksburg, Mississippi. She has the whole Mississippi Valley, 6 districts all the way up and down the river. So she's talking about right here how she's pulling in new technology to help her deliver her program on time, within budget, within quality, safely to the nation. So this is an Army Corps of Engineers strategy, not just ERDC. ERDC is developing the technology, but the Corps of Engineers itself has to use it, and then others use it as well with our partners. So one example, many, many examples, so please pull our publications down. One example is something called Forecast Informed Reservoir Operations, or FIRO. Now, we've been working on FIRO for the last few years with a partner, Scripps Institute over in California. We couldn't have done it without them. So we work with NOAA, by the way, the Weather Service people, and it's really dealing with atmospheric rivers. So California has had a problem with atmospheric rivers in the past month. They've gone through record droughts, some of the driest weather they've had in centuries right now in our whole western half of our nation, particularly California. But in the past month, they had atmospheric rivers, essentially rivers of water in the atmosphere coming from the Pacific, and just dumping tremendous amounts of water in California and those basins in just hours. So it's a deluge of water. And normally the way we'd operate with that, it would just kind of run right down the rivers, run through the dams, and go back out into the ocean. Well, they need that water badly. So we came up with this technique, working with Scripps and NOAA and other partners out there, to say, hey, can we hold back some of that water for our use, for flood fighting, for instance, for water quality and water supply? And by doing that, by anticipating that water before the first drop ever hits the ground, we can manage it a lot more effectively when it actually does hit the ground. And that's where the Corps of Engineers comes in, is managing those reservoirs through water control manuals, they call them. Very sophisticated ways of opening the gates up or closing the gates to let the water come through. And so by doing that, just this in one demonstration project at Lake Mendocino, a pilot project, in the 3rd driest summer on record, we were able to save enough water, one dam, for 22,000 more homes.
Wow.
Just demonstrating the power of the technology. So that's just one example.
With real impact.
With real impact. They needed water.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
And those are the type of success stories that we definitely want to be connecting others with.
That story is right in here, by the way.
So I want to remind the audience that we also want to connect with you. And so if you have any questions, just put them right in the chat if you're on YouTube or on LinkedIn. And we will answer those questions next. So I have one last question for you, Dr. Pittman. While our history is built on engineering solutions for civil works, we talked a lot about civil works this morning, the support we provide for our military is a large part of ERDC's portfolio. Where are some areas where ERDC is helping the U.S. military prepare for the conflicts of today and tomorrow?
Yes. So our military portfolio is about 80% of what we do, actually. So we support the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines. We run one of the largest DoD research programs. We're sitting in our information technology lab. Behind those walls right there is some of the fastest supercomputers in the world. So we run the Department of Defense's high performance computing modernization program. You add all those numbers up, it's about 80% of what we do. So what we do is discover, develop, and deliver technology. So we do the basic research and applied research, and then we actually work reimbursably, we call it. So the Army or Navy or Marines will pay us to help transition that technology. We call that operationalizing R&D, and put that technology into practice. Let me give you an example. So CENTCOM, we do a lot of work in CENTCOM and a lot of work overseas, supporting our warfighters in real military operations. Had a challenge with a major ballistic weapon hitting one of our bases in CENTCOM just a couple years ago. Now, fortunately, nobody was killed when that major weapon hit our base, but when our military ran into the bunkers were designed for smaller weapons. They weren't designed for a ballistic weapon. So with the ballistic weapon, it didn't kill anybody, but just the pressure wave that came out actually gave a lot of our soldiers traumatic brain injuries. Nobody was killed. So the CENTCOM commander, 4-star general, calls ERDC and said, hey, can those engineers help me out? So all the technology we had developed in our basic and applied research programs over several decades of research said, yes, we can, sir. So we came up in a matter of months and come up with a way of retrofitting those bunkers that would withstand that major blast from a major ballistic weapon designed to take out whole cities, and protected our soldiers so they would not get traumatic brain injury the next time that happens. And those are getting put in place as we speak. That's the kind of impact we have. We know that we're literally saving lives with the technology that we're developing today.
And that's one of the things that I love about ERDC is that we do invest in both basic and applied research.
That's right.
And so when you need the answers to those problems immediately, we're not having to wait decades on basic research to get it to applied research to have an answer, because we've been working on these problems long before we knew it was a problem.
Exactly. That's what you got to. And you got to have all three. You
have to have all
that
three.
Basic, thinking the long game there. Just, what are the technologies out there? What could they possibly do? Applied research is kind of starting to develop those capabilities, and then demonstrating it, actually putting those problems or solutions out there on real world problems.
All the operational R&D.
And then the operational R&D,
right.
the whoever the partner is, will pay us then to help them on a specific challenge that they have.
That's right. And so that's one of the beauty of working with ERDC.
I know.
Is we can do all.
The whole
spectrum. The whole spectrum
that's right.
of R&D.
And a huge range of problems.
That's right. It's so exciting. So we're going to take questions from the audience. And the first question is, it says, Juan would like to talk about activities and plans related to engineering with nature.
Excellent. That's another great example, by the way. It's probably one of our most iconic programs, and we got to thank Dr. Todd Bridges, who really was the pioneer of this effort, but Todd himself would tell you. So Todd's one of our top scientists that work at ERDC. He's an ST, so he's at the top level, not just at ERDC, in the Army. So Todd came up with this concept working with a bunch of other partners internationally called engineering with nature. So engineering with nature is, the simple way I can describe it is that a lot of times we engineer against nature. We try to build a sheet pile of concrete and steel, for instance, to protect our shorelines from waves. And nobody wants to live behind a steel wall, right?
That's right.
Unless you have to. So, but there's natural ways of mitigating storm damage, for instance. Mother Nature knows how to build mangrove swamps, for instance, and mangrove trees, and natural dunes, sand dunes. That's what sand dunes do. They protect the interior part of the land from huge surge waves. So that's what Todd's great insight was. He said, hey, can we solve these engineering challenges with nature and help cultivate our natural ability to come up with these protection systems from coastal storms, for instance, or restoring a habitat, or depositing dredge materials, and turn dredge material from a waste product into a useful or beneficial product. That was where Engineering with Nature was born about 10 years ago. And now today it's an international movement, 3 volumes of examples of Engineering with Nature products that are just beautiful additions of and examples of how Engineering with Nature can help us going forward. And it's just taking the world by storm. Congress is in love with this. The president just made a speech earlier this year talking about natural nature-based features and how they can help us. So we're just beginning what we can do with Engineering with Nature. A whole lot more research we need to do. We need to come up with engineering practices and principles, for instance, that incorporate these technologies in the actual how we design future projects. But the capabilities already demonstrated. Now we just got to put it into practice.
Absolutely. And I'm going to remind our audience that as far as Engineering with Nature, And they have a wonderful podcast.
Yes.
And so you can go to any of your podcast players and just search for Engineering with Nature, and it'll come up. So I encourage you to subscribe to that, or even go to our Engineering with Nature website, which is absolutely wonderful. So you just Google that, EWN or Engineering with Nature, and find all the information about those topics. So our next question is from Kelly. How is ERDC's R&D supporting the renewed interest and investment in our nation's infrastructure?
Oh my goodness. So one of the challenges we face, and it's highlighted in the USACE R&D strategy, one of the top 10 priorities is on infrastructure. So we obviously have a huge infrastructural problem in the United States, just within our continental United States. A lot of problems in Alaska and Hawaii, a lot of problems worldwide, but just focused on the United States. That's what our Civil Works mission really is focused on now. We spend billions of dollars on our infrastructure, water resources infrastructure in the United States. That's our locks, dams, levees, that sort of thing. There's a lot more infrastructure, of course. Federal Highway Administration has a lot of bridges, for instance, and highways, some of the largest infrastructure out there. But just on the USACE infrastructure alone, it's decades old, it's decades past its supposedly design life, and it's still functioning out there. So we got a lot of challenges extending the life of that infrastructure. And so what Mr. Connor, our Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works, and the Chief of Engineers, General Spellman, have done is they're proposing a major R&D program in Civil Works to address problems associated with infrastructure, sediment management, using artificial intelligence and machine learning and robotics, crisis mitigation and response, water modeling, huge problems with modeling water. We talked about FIRO as an example, for instance, earlier. So we call them 6 strategic focus areas, and infrastructure is one of the biggest ones because there's so many challenges, again, involving with, the way I like to talk about is understanding, predicting, and shaping our infrastructure. Understanding what's going on with it right now. How do we monitor it? How do we tell its condition over time? We have something called structural health monitoring, for instance, that can help us do that. Predicting how long it's going to last is a huge challenge. You know, how can we, all the ways it can fail, how do you factor that in when you look at a particular dam or a particular lock? And how can you predict exactly how long it's going to last and what might impact that, particularly with the climate issues that are happening right now, the more loads we're putting on our infrastructure. And then shape is all about, okay, now you understand the condition it's in, you understand where it's going to be over time, what can you do about it? What are those carbon fiber retrofits that you can put on there? Or what are better ways of designing, you know, retrofits or new infrastructure that can mitigate the challenges like flooding, like water supply, like all these other issues that we know we're going to be facing in the next 50 to 100 years. That's exactly what we need to do in our Civil Works R&D arena. We're trying to get the money to do that now. I hope we're going to be successful in doing that.
And so when you talk about infrastructure, one of the things that I like about ERDC, maybe you could speak to, and we've talked a little bit about the power verdict, but when I think of infrastructure and think of things like FRP and some of the work, what is so fascinating with that is how we leverage so many labs.
Yes, that's right.
So we don't attack it from just one aspect.
Geotechnical or structures, exactly. So we have 7 labs in ERDC. So 4 are here in Mississippi and Vicksburg, where we're sitting today, plus our headquarters. So I grew up in the Geotechnical and Structures lab. I'm a pavements guy, concrete, roller compacted concrete pavements guy. So that's my technical thing. But my goodness, we're so much broader. Just in the Geotech and Structures lab, we have a lot of structures people, we have blast weapons effects people, we have sand boil people. Sand boils is another thing we're doing now. So sand boils happen when you have major floods against levees, and the water, it'll try to go up under the levees. When it raises inside the levees, it'll find basically channels of sand, old riverbeds and gravel. And it'll just channel right up under the levee, and it'll pop out on the other side. And they'll actually create a channel of water that's not good to have, by the way.
All the seepage that's
all the seepage under your levees.
Right.
So the way you tackle those typically is you just stack a bunch of sandbags around it and build up a water column until it evens out the water pressure. And then it'll stop when the flood goes back down. So we came up with this device. It's like a spear almost with a filter on the end of it. It's actually a tube. and you can throw it down in that sand bowl, and it's 100 times faster than sandbags and 100 times cheaper than sandbags. You can do it in seconds versus 30 minutes to build up a sandbag thing.
Absolutely.
So that's the kind of technology that we're coming up with and investing in, and we need to invest in with more R&D funding going forward.
And that's something that also saves communities. And we've talked about resilient communities in
Yes.
the past and coming back from these natural disasters. And of course, me being from Vicksburg,
Yes.
I know all about having to fill up these sandbags
Yes.
and the many army it takes of volunteers
That's right.
to get it out there. And all, so the idea of a kit that's done right here in Vicksburg.
Right here,
that's
produced right here.
Produced right here.
We're getting it patented and licensed
Absolutely.
and produced, and so now the broader Corps of Engineers and communities can use this.
Right.
But that was the Geotech and Structures Lab. That's just one.
Just one.
We're sitting here in the Information Technology Lab. Again, they have some of the fastest supercomputers in the world because we're going to need these very sophisticated models. As I said, in the understand and predict shape paradigm, that's the whole predict thing. We got to have these very sophisticated numerical models with artificial intelligence and machine learning, kind of like ChatGPT.
That's right.
It's out now, right now. It's
That's right.
the latest craze. So we have experts that do that sort of thing,
That's right.
predicting what's going to happen. We have an environmental laboratory, Engineer with Nature we just talked about, that looking at nature and natural nature-based features, but they're also looking at cleaning up contaminants.
Mm-hmm.
PFAS is
That's
one of the
right.
major contaminants out there. It's all over the place. We have a lot on our installations. So we're looking at ways of detecting it and cleaning it and mitigating it because it's extremely expensive to clean up right now. We have a coastal and hydraulics lab, which is our original laboratory. Started in 1929 right here in Vicksburg, that's studying these water challenges I talked about. We have a co-regions lab in New Hampshire. They're the DOD's laboratory for the Arctic. So if you want to do anything in very cold regions like the Arctic or Antarctica or Hindu Kush Mountains in Afghanistan, you better know something about cold and how to
That's
operate
right.
in it. They're the experts there. We have a construction engineering research lab in Illinois, Champaign, Illinois, co-located with the University of Illinois. They're all about construction engineering, particularly on military installations. So they study anything from threatened and endangered species, like birds and snakes and frogs, on some of our military installations, to 3D printing of buildings
That's right.
with concrete. It's just stunning the kind of things they come up with. And finally, we have our geospatial research lab. They are the Army's lab, and really there's no DoD equivalent to them, what they do. So our original mission for the nation, for the Corps of Engineers, we were the map makers.
That's right.
And to this day, we're still the map makers.
Still the map maker.
We're still the map makers, and our geospatial research lab is constantly coming up with new ways of making those maps. It's not just the map,
Right.
it's making that map brilliant.
That's right.
Not just smart, brilliant. We need to know where the enemy is before the enemy knows that we know where they are.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
So the Hindu Kush Mountains or anywhere we are in the world, so whether it's on the continental United States or in Afghanistan, we know how to map it.
That's right.
We know how to put things on there to make the battlefield commander, for instance, safer and give him an advantage that the enemy just simply doesn't have.
Which is so crucial when we're talking about force projection.
Yes.
Of knowing where we're going and how to get there and the logistics all involved. You have to understand the terrain.
I know the terrain.
So what a great mission our friends at GRL have.
Yes.
And so our next question is, the person says, I would like to hear about what the Army Corps of Engineers thinks of new energy storage technology like Earth Pressurized Bladder, EPB, or monolith pressured piston systems. And so a lot of that question kind of reminds me of some of our technology we're doing at Fort Carson with flow battery technology. The
batteries.
flow battery. Can
Right.
you tell people a little bit about what we're doing in this space?
Yes. So I'm not the energy engineer, but our Searle people are, and I do know about the flow battery. So those two specific technologies, I don't know. We probably are. We can check, particularly whether our Searle laboratory in Illinois. But I do know that we're working through Searle with the industry, with Lockheed Martin, actually installing one of the largest batteries in the world at Fort Carson. So we have a mandate in the Department of Defense to make our military bases operational for 14 days off the grid.
Wow.
So the power goes out, we got to be able to operate for 14 days. Well, how are you going to do that? You got to store energy for megawatts of energy, because installations are like small cities. That's a lot of power. So we have the capability with this flow battery, working with Lockheed Martin. It's never been done. We're building it now to actually store enough energy to run megawatts of energy for at least 10 days. We need to get to 14. Depending on how you use it, it might last 14. But it's the biggest battery in the world, and it uses something called flow battery technology. It's slightly different than lead acid batteries or other kinds of batteries. But these are the kind of unique solutions that we got to have as we deal with the energy crisis really around the world. So we try to transition from fossil fuel type energy with the climate change issues that we're facing today to other more renewable energy sources, and then you got to be able to store it in a safe way for long periods of time. So we're coming up with ways of generating energy without fossil fuels, storing it, distributing it, and managing it much more efficiently than ever before. So we'll need to check on those other two technologies because I haven't heard of them before, frankly, but I bet we are. Yeah. So thanks for giving us that tip.
And we'll, and for those of you that are watching, we will post answers in the chat after we're done. And so, but we are doing a lot of research in the energy space, particularly at Searle. Dr.
I bet
Andy
Searle
Nelson,
knows the answer to that question.
Absolutely. Dr. Andy Nelson and his team are doing a fabulous job in that research space. With the recent opening and use of Fort Hood Gap Crossing training site, what was the final outcome of string velocity test of the IRB carrying our Army's heaviest tanks at ERDC over the past year?
That is a great question.
So I'm pretty sure that they're talking about the gap crossing, the ribbon bridge.
The ribbon bridge.
Carrying the Army's heaviest tanks. So can you tell us any updates about some of that technology?
That's right. I don't have the answer to that specific question, but I do know that we're doing research today on the ribbon bridge that we use to cross major gaps, wide gaps, basically rivers. And it's a floating bridge. Essentially, that's what it is. And so you can put very large vehicles like tanks that weigh 50, 60, 70 tons. And it's one thing if the river's not flowing. So if it was like a lake, just a still body of water, and you put a ribbon bridge across a floating bridge, say 100 yards long, so pretty good sized river or lake, let's just say the water's not flowing, the tank can make it across if it's very careful, across that ribbon bridge, across that floating bridge, and get to the other side. So what this study is doing is, okay, let's put it in a river where it was meant to be. Now the water's flowing. Now it's flowing under that bridge. And as the tank goes and the water's flowing under the bridge, it can start to pull that bridge under, and the tank could go bloop right into the river. That's not good.
No.
So we're working on the ribbon bridge and technologies to upgrade the ribbon bridge, working with our partners in Detroit who actually build these river bridges and come up with new technology, new modifications to the design so they can hold these tanks up and even bigger tanks that we expect to be in the future, so that when you want to cross that river and the water's flowing, you're not going to topple over in the water.
That's
You're
right.
going to stay on top of that bridge and make it across that river together. So they're talking about a particular demonstration. I don't know the outcome of that yet, but we can get back to you.
We can absolutely post some more information about that in the chat. And we have a question from one of our industry partners. Can we see one of these tubes used at levees to keep the water intrusion from under the levee? That would be amazing to see. So
yes.
They're talking about the sample filter.
The sample filter. There you go. Yeah, you're paying attention.
How can industry get their hands on that?
Well, we're getting it patented now, so we expect over the next year to start rolling that out and getting it actually in production.
Right.
So we got just a few prototypes basically right now. So I don't know the answer on that timeline, but one of our young researchers can answer that for us. But we expect to start doing more pilot studies over this next year and full production here, I would say months. But let's get the specific answer.
And I would say to our industry partners, also check out, you can just Google this, ERDC Works. So ERDC Works is our partner that helps transition a lot of our patentable technology that's up for licensing agreements and that sort of thing. And so also look at ERDC Works to probably see more information on how to partner with us.
That's right, yes.
And so, but that's exciting for us to see.
It is. We featured it last week at we called it our governance week.
Yeah.
Basically, the chief engineer is bringing all his generals in, and all senior executives, and he actually likes to present new technologies to all of our senior executives in the Army and our generals. And that technology was actually presented by the researcher that came up with it. It was a huge hit. We're going to start using it in the Corps, but I'm glad our partners out there in the local government, state governments, and others get that technology because we really need it when we have floods.
Absolutely. So we have another question. This one is from Dirk. In your opinion, what are some areas where more R&D attention is necessary?
Yes. So I would say there's a lot of areas, but right now in our civil works programs, our money to build new things and operate and maintain what we have today is going out the roof. And like responding to disasters, so that whole civil works mission that we have, Mr. Connor's mission, the Assistant Secretary of the Army Civil Works, is exploding, but our research dollars aren't. And so Mr. Connor himself is one of his top 5 priorities, get more science and technology in what we do. The Chief of Engineers, it's big. That's why we wrote the R&D strategy. So I would say in our civil works program, there's 6 strategic focus areas that I just mentioned a minute ago. Infrastructure, sediment management, environmental things, threatened and endangered species, harmful algal blooms, that water modeling, using AI, machine learning, and robotics, and crisis mitigation and response. Those are the 6 what we're calling strategic focus areas because of the biggest challenges we're facing, buckets of challenges. So that's where we have our biggest gap right now, frankly. So Mr. Connor is, as we speak, trying to get more resources to address that. So he's working inside of our system to try to get that done. But that's where we need most of our R&D. That's the biggest gap that I see right now in our whole mission space. And we're working to try to get that gap filled as we speak.
Very good. And so is ERDC involved in the space mission? Is ERDC involved in the space mission? We've heard a lot about space over the last few weeks.
Well, yes, we are. We absolutely are. This goes all the way back to the original space mission, by the way, the Apollo missions back in the 60s and 70s. So you remember the lunar buggy? I forget what they called it. But it was the lunar rover, I think it was. Lunar rover. So all the way back then. So since World War II, the 40s, we have been involved in mobility studies for all ground vehicles for the United States military, primarily the Army and the Marines. What that means is any Jeep, any tank, any track vehicle, wheel vehicle, when you build it, it's not like driving it on the highway. So you got to take these things off-road, and that's where things get really funky if you've ever driven off-road. You don't know if they're going to stick or they're going to move like they should. So that's called mobility. So how do you understand that, and how do you understand the vehicle-terrain interaction, we call it? So we're the world's experts in that, okay? So roll around to the 60s. Now President Kennedy says we're going to the moon. Well, we're not just going to go to the moon, we're going to drive on the moon. We're going to build a lunar buggy. So we think we know what's there. It's dust, moon dust. We're building this buggy, but we don't want to pull it out on this dust and just get stuck.
That's right.
We get one shot at it.
That's right.
So they came to ERDC, Waterways Experiment Station at the time, and they said, hey, can you help us design this buggy, and particularly the wheels that'll drive through this moon dust? I said, sure, that's what we do. So yes, we've been involved from the space mission from the very, very beginning. And to this day, we're working with Space Force, we're working with Elon Musk, SpaceX, and others, coming up with ways of using the latest technology, like landing pads, for instance.
That's right.
Airfields and pavements, that's my own background. They put special heat and other forces on landing pads that we simply haven't seen before. These things can land anywhere. You've seen them land on a barge.
That's right.
So how can we come up with ways of landing these where we need to? And they're really turning, just flipping space technology and how we use space that we've, couldn't imagine 40 years ago. So they need us to help them do what they do effectively for the nation.
And that's, again, one of the things that we talk about Power of ERDC are our partnerships.
Yes, exactly.
As we've
so
had
with
a
NASA,
long
with
partnership
SpaceX.
with NASA for years, and lots of research we've done over the years with them.
Another challenge is building on the moon and Mars. So they say, hey, when we get there, we can't haul cement and concrete and steel with us. We got to build with what's there. So what can we do using the construction materials that are on the moon or on Mars and build habitable structures? We're going to live there long term, so we're studying that right now with NASA, coming up with ways of construction technologies for the moon and for Mars. Can you believe that?
That is incredible.
Isn't that incredible? Yes.
But it actually makes sense because we have been doing the same for the military, and
That's right.
and using construction materials that are there, so we're not having to haul in concrete or wherever.
That's right.
To where the conflict is at, and
Exactly.
so it does make sense that we would.
We know how to do it on the Earth.
We know how to do it
Let's
here.
do it for
Why
the moon.
not? Exactly. It would be the same concepts. So we have another question from our audience. What are some of the new or expanding capabilities at ERDC we can expect to see soon that support this global research mission? I'm going to say that one more time. What are some new or expanding capabilities at ERDC we can expect to see soon that support the global research mission? And when I hear that question, of course, I'm thinking of a lot of our brand new facilities that offer us brand new capabilities. So can
Absolutely.
you talk to us about that?
Yes. Well, I think of a couple of technologies right off the bat. So we have this thing called eDNA. We haven't talked about that yet. So DNA, is the genetic footprint of every living thing, whether plant or animal. So eDNA says, hey, it's environmental DNA. So it says a lot of times we have to, with threatened and endangered species, we have to make sure that we're not damaging the population, and we have to understand the population is there, for instance, on our military bases, like snakes or frogs or whatever the species is. But sometimes it's actually hard to find these species. You could set a trap out and never catch one. I mean, how do you physically find them? Well, they leave pieces of DNA all over the place in the environment as they move out there. So we can take samples from the environment. You don't actually have to have the actual snake or frog.
Right.
You can get where they've touched the ground or left remnants on the ground and detect with traces of DNA in the soil and in the environment to see. And by using that technique, we can do that 50 to 100 times faster and cheaper than we could by old conventional methods of trying to find the snake.
That's right.
So that's an example. Some of the facilities that we have, for instance, at our Cold Regions Lab in New Hampshire, we have facilities that can take you well below zero, very sub-zero. So because the mission is cold regions. So to do cold regions research, they're in New Hampshire, they're pretty cold. But we got to get a lot colder than that. We got to be looking at Antarctica and the Arctic. So you got to have these cold chambers that get 50 below zero, for instance. And you got to test materials. You got to test tanks, equipment. We work with all of our NATO partners. It's Canada, Sweden, Norway. So we're anticipating in the future we might actually have to have combat in the Arctic. Actually, the number 10 out of the top 10 R&D priorities is protect and defend the Arctic. We have the capability of understanding what that means. How do you actually operate in the Arctic? It's like operating on another planet. It's so cold that things that work in temperate regions just won't work in the Arctic. So we need to know what the limits of things are. They might be designed to work in the Arctic, but they don't work in the Arctic, okay? So it's just, will the engine run? Can you get traction? So we'll work with our international partners, like Sweden and Norway, for instance. We have agreements with them to get in those cold chambers, put them through the paces, so the Arctic paces, so to speak, just to see will they work. Because when they have to work, they need to work.
That's right.
That's what we do. We make sure that we're the best in the world. Our military has what they need to answer the call when they need it. Because when they need it, you don't need to be discovering at that point. You need to know it. That's what we're doing. So we have all kinds of neat technologies. We could spend all day listing all the really, really cool things that we're doing, but that's a couple.
Yes. And there again, that goes back to, we've been doing this research.
Yes.
This isn't
Since
new.
1929.
We've been doing this research in cold regions. I mean,
Since 1960.
Yes, since 1960.
That's right.
And have the permafrost tunnel. I mean, we've landed huge aircrafts in Antarctica,
Yes.
and so we
Build runways on ice.
Yes, so this is nothing new. So when the challenge arises, we're ready.
We're ready.
We're ready to answer the
Yes,
call, and
yes.
that's the wonderful thing about ERDC. So the next question is: you've talked about efforts to connect the dots between R&D and real-world problems. What is the biggest challenge in making that connection?
Yes, that's an excellent question.
It
So
is.
in the world of R&D, we have what we call the Valley of Death. If you work in R&D, you know this. So the Valley of Death means it's talking about transitioning technology. So on one side of the valley, you have R&D. You have scientists. We love to come up with new ways of doing things all the time. And sometimes they may work and sometimes they might not work, but we're all coming up with this cool new way of doing something. Then on the other side of the Valley of Death, you have people who actually are in operations. They're buildings. In the Corps of Engineers, we build things. We build dams. We build levees. We maintain locks. We do dredging. So we have this mission in the Corps where we spend $90 billion doing that sort of stuff. We spend a couple of billion over here coming up with new ways of doing it. So how do you cross that Valley of Death? That's kind of what we talk about. It's big in the Army, by the way, too. So Willie Nelson, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Research and Technology. Willie is in charge of the entire Army S&T budget. That's over $2 billion a year coming up with these new things over here. So his big initiative with Mr. Bush, the ASALT for the Army, is how are we transitioning these technologies, guys? That's warfighter type stuff. Come up with this cool way of doing it. Are we working with the people actually fighting wars over here? So he's got a huge initiative, and he just came and visited with us last month to see how we transition technology. And we were able to show him that we were able to come up with a new way of doing it, demonstrate how to do it. That's one plank across the bridge.
That's right.
And then we get the people who are doing the operations, we're calling this operational R&D, to pay for the plank going the other way. And so you start building that bridge across the Valley of Death, and you put those new things into practice.
That's right.
Because you got to come up with the new stuff, but if you don't put it into practice, you're wasting your money. Okay, so come up with these new ways of doing things. Not all of them are going to work, but at some point you got to impact actual operations. So it's a very deliberate effort. He was so impressed. He said, "Hey, that's my exemplar. I want to talk to all the other Army labs about how to do this now, because we've been doing this for a very long time. We really pride ourselves in coming up with these new solutions."
That's right.
Putting them into practice. We're calling that operational R&D.
Right.
So that's how we do it.
And building that bridge across the
Valley
of Death, and we're
That's
going
right.
to meet in the middle, and we have done that so very well.
Yes.
In our history, we have a long history of that. So, Dr. Pittman, thank you so much for your insightful talk. And I'm going to ask. We have a couple more questions. How can engineering graduates from U.S. colleges gain volunteering work experience in civil works and environmental R&D division? Can you talk to us a little bit about hiring goals? Like, what does it take to be part of our team, and what some of our recruitment activities that we're doing?
Well, thanks for that question, because we need you. Please, thank you for your interest. In the Corps of Engineers, we have 35,000 people. We replace probably 10% a year. We're growing, by the way, so I think 3,000 to 4,000 people just in the Corps of Engineers itself a year. That's a lot of people, okay? In the ERDC, we have about 2,500 people, so we're going to grow by 10% a year just to get to that, by the way. So we got to hire 300 or 400 people just in the ERDC, across all those labs and disciplines. So engineers and scientists. So we recruit nationwide. You can we go to usajobs.gov. That's generally how we do it. That's any federal position. That's how you do it. But reach out to us. So what I really encourage you to do is reach out to us. You can Google us. How do you get in touch with us about the kind of job opportunities we have? But we work with students in high school, students in college. We have outreach programs. So we have ways that you can work with us. Volunteers, some, we'll pay you. Come work with us. And do a summer job with us and just kind of see the kind of things that we do. And then if you really want to join our team, because we hire the best in the world now, and the kind of thing that we do is we're coming up with a new way of doing something. So a lot of engineers and scientists, the R&D is kind of like, what is that? That's what I said when I started here in 1983. What is that? But I'm so glad I joined the team. I just wanted to go build bridges like my daddy did for a living. But when I came here, I got so excited about the creativity, the new way of doing something. I got very turned on by this new way of coming. We talked about creating the future.
Yes.
This new way of doing something. Those are the big challenges where you really have to rack your brain and say, okay, how can we solve this problem?
Right.
And so, yeah, we need you, whether you're high school, you can volunteer with some of our high school programs, college, summer student programs, we'll pay you, don't worry. We got summer camps, by the way, for junior high and high school kids, just to kind of expose them to STEM. But we're going to hire like crazy. We're going to hire hundreds of engineers and scientists just this year alone across just about any discipline you can name. Civil engineering, mechanical engineering, just about any engineering, electrical engineering, computer engineering, and then the sciences, computer science, biology, chemistry, physics, almost any kind that you can name. And by the way, when you come work with us, the special part is the thing you get to do, but then we're going to train you even more. If you come with a bachelor's degree, we're going to pay for you to get your master's and expect you to get it, by the way. If you have your master's degrees, we're going to pay for your PhD and expect you to get it.
That's right.
So right now, 2/3 of our people are engineers and scientists, and it's roughly 1/3 of those engineers and scientists are bachelors, about 1/3 are masters, about 1/3 are PhDs. We'll pay for that. So you need to be thinking about that when you come work with us. We're going to invest in you very heavily. So, and when we invest in you, you invest in us, and that makes us, that's the power of Verdict, really, is our people. So come join our team. I really hope you give us a shot. We really would like to have you join our team and solve some of the nation's toughest challenges.
And both of us benefited from the Graduate Institute.
That's how I got my master's.
That's where, yeah, absolutely. And they paid for it. And
100% paid for it while I worked.
I mean, yeah. I mean, there's not a better deal.
Yes, yes. So I say all the time, my undergraduate degree, Mississippi State University in Civil Engineering in 1983, was my hardest degree.
Right.
My master's degree, while I worked, I was working with some of the top experts in the world.
Absolutely.
Teaching these graduate classes through Mississippi State.
That's right.
Got my master's degree while I worked. Then I was sent to long-term training at University of Texas at Austin, some of the top pavements expert. That was my field. And did all my research there. All of it's paid for. Made money on the deal. I mean, rent paid, food paid for, everything. Came back to ERDC, did my research, dissertation, and finished 3 years later. In just the job I was doing.
Right.
I was doing research and development.
That's right.
So we make it about as easy as you can make it. I say my PhD was my easiest degree. My bachelor's was the hardest, and the master's was somewhere in between.
Absolutely. And I agree, working with the experts that you rub shoulders with, just walking up and down the halls, that helps. So I know it helped me with my master's degree of looking down and seeing, hey, the authors and the footnotes, it's the guy that's right across the hall.
I just walked by. Right. I often say that I learned more in our break room on the 3rd floor of the Casa Grande building than I did at any graduate class I ever took.
Absolutely. I had the same experience of learning all about potmology in CHL break room. So we're going to wrap it up, and I want to remind our viewers, if you want to come work with us, like Dr. Pittman said, I'm going to give you an email for you to write down, erdicinfo@usace.army.mil, erdicinfo@usace.army.mil. You can send information to us that way, and we will get it to our recruitment, all of our recruitment people. And I want to thank you, Dr. Pittman, for joining us today, kicking off an early E-Week.
Yes.
And talking to us so much about the importance of ERDC's contribution to both the warfighter and our nation. And viewers, until next time, we'll see you next month. We're going to be talking about sustainable materials. It will be a panel discussion, so I know our viewers will not want to miss that. So between now and then, find your joy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shelley.